I just wanted to take a look at some super chats from last week. I forgot to take these last week, so I apologize to my 2 super chatters for missing those, but let's cover them now and see what they had to say. The Gaytheist says, would you say Jesus was a cult leader? It's really, really hard to say because I'm not extremely clear about how he ran things, how it operated when he was leading it. If I were to take just what the Bible says about it and what I understand from like my childhood growing up hearing these stories, I would say no, probably not. But I know that that's not the case. Like, I know that that's not how things played out. I know that the story that we're told about Jesus and how he operated and everything does not reflect reality, if he was a real person at all. So I'm just going to have to take it for granted that he was a real person and that this is how it played out. I would say no, but there were a lot of cult-like tendencies to it. Like, he's basically said you should be willing to give everything up for this, and that's pretty concerning. He also offered up a lot of black and white thinking, things like that. Sell all of your things and follow me. You know, had this hatred for money or wealth of any sort, that kind of thing. So there were a lot of really concerning things about Jesus and his ideology generally. But I'd say it was more of a mindset, like a cult-like mindset than a full-blown cult. Because he did talk to outsiders and stuff, and that was kind of frowned upon at the time. So, next super chat. We have little faith. If the Bible was proven 100% true tomorrow, I still wouldn't follow God, because if he's real, he's a bastard. Very true, especially the God of the Old Testament is just a really, really terrible being. Like, awful like no morals. The God of the Bible is just like completely immoral, just really terrible stuff that happened. I mean, just ask the Midianites. There are no Midianites. He killed all of them. So, never mind. I guess don't ask the Midianites. He was a really terrible being. He's got no morality. So, here's another super chat. QAnon has a very strong scent of cult. Heart Owen. Thank you. Yeah, you're right. They do. I haven't really researched QAnon a lot yet, but I actually have a very, very close relative who's QAnon, and they're not good. They are very, very extreme, to say the least. I would call that a cult, for sure, a political cult, no doubt. Lorenz, I think is the name. They asked how being anti-wealth is cult-like. It's not. Being anti-wealth is not cult-like, but it's having that kind of controlling structure where you're imposing an ideology on people that's cult-like. And having all of the views that Jesus had in general was very cult-like. One of those views being anti-wealth. You know, it's just an addition to the mix. So that's what I meant. Another super chat. Omega Riley. I fell asleep in my chair. I'm going to scamper off to bed. Merry Christmas, Telltale. Thank you, Omega Riley, for coming. You didn't have to come. So, and thanks for the super chat. That's fantastic. I know you're trying to save money for various things right now, so thank you very much for that. You didn't have to do that. Somebody asked, would you say that every new religion is good until it gets power and starts to politicize it in self-interest? That was FMR on YouTube. I would say no. No, there are religions that are not good from the moment they start. For example, Heaven's Gate was really small. It was only 39 people at its height. And like when all that went down in 1997, I think, it wasn't good from the start. I mean, they had good intentions. A lot of the time these groups have good intentions, but they're doing bad things. So take that for what you will. For example, they didn't believe then. They thought that they were space aliens that didn't belong in these bodies, and so they were mutilating their bodies to match what they thought that they should. It was just not good at all.
This first one's coming from Trior. Ohio is currently having an issue with ectopic pregnancies. Lawmakers want to implement charges against doctors who cannot reimplant an embryo from the fallopian tube to the uterus, as it is medically impossible, and charge women for proceeding with abortion. 1. Should abortion laws be so stringent, especially for medical emergencies? And two, why do you think lawmakers are going after women and health workers so much?
I actually heard about that. I heard that basically they were trying to force doctors to reimplant ectopic pregnancies, and if they don't, then they can be jailed. That's so crazy. First of all, let me just explain a part of the law that a lot of people may not know about. Say you're at a pool and you see somebody drowning. It may be your moral duty to jump in and save them, but it's not your legal duty. In fact, if you jump in and try to save them and they die anyways, you are legally responsible for their death. But if you don't do anything at all, if you ignore it, you're not legally responsible for anything. Legally speaking, you can't be compelled to act like that. And that's what this Pennsylvania law is doing. It's compelling somebody to act. And if they don't, then they blah. If they don't, they go to jail. That is so completely ass backwards from what our country was built upon. Like, I can't even believe that this was proposed by somebody serious in the political field. And on top of that, I can't believe they didn't consult doctors about this. You can't reimplant an embryo like that, from my understanding. This could be incorrect, but from what I understand, it's not possible to reimplant an ectopic pregnancy, even if you wanted to. So the fact that these lawmakers actually wrote this law and read it over and said to themselves, yeah, this sounds right, and then pushed it through is mind-blowing. Like, they must not understand what this country was built on. They must not understand anything about the Constitution or civil rights or the goals of the founding fathers or anything to try to compel somebody to act like that legally. That's just really, really bizarre to me. Like, how did these people get into office? I wish I knew more about the story. I don't know much about it, unfortunately, but it's just a really, really bizarre situation. To answer your question, I think you asked, why do I think they're targeting women like this? Well, obviously, women are adversely affected by this. They are the main target of this situation. I don't think that they are specifically setting out to hurt women with this. That is who is hurt by it. But I think they're just they set this goal and they're trying to do something specific, and they don't give a shit who it hurts. So that's the end result, I think. Okay, one thing, Rat Elemental in the chat said there are things called Good Samaritan laws specifically to protect people trying to save another person who failed to do so. That's from the season finale of Seinfeld. That's not real. That does not exist. That was just made up by Seinfeld, and people actually believed that it was real. Anyway, I'm sorry. So can you ask the question one more time? Rat Elemental actually says that they have a source for this. I have a source for mine, and my source for the Good Samaritan laws being made up was the YouTube channel Legal Eagle. They talked about it a lot in great detail. You guys should check that episode out, actually. It's Seinfeld season finale episode is what it is. But I'm just taking a look at this real fast, this article that Rat Elemental posted, Good Samaritan laws by state. When incidental to a business relationship existing between the employer or principal of the person rendering such care, service, or transportation, and the employer or principal of the person receiving such care, service, or of the person receiving such care, service, or transportation. I don't know. It's a little bit confusing. I'd have to read a lot more about it. Like I said, if you guys want to watch the Legal Eagle episode about Seinfeld, the season finale of Seinfeld, he talks about this in great depth as a lawyer, about whether or not it's legal to compel somebody to act. And pretty much in most cases, Good Samaritan laws are made up. That's what he was saying. So probably just check his sources, since, like I said, I'm not the lawyer here.
So from a cringy trap, Telltale, what do you think of the education system in America?
It depends on the area heavily. I think that, like, for example, in Alabama, the education system is just bombarded heavily with religion constantly. Like, they're shoving it down your throat. It's just terrible. West Virginia, in many areas in West Virginia, that's true too. But in my specific location, it's not so bad. I would really like to see. Here's the issue with it. They write curriculums, like they have scientists write curriculums up and pass them out to the various schools and say, and childhood psychologists, developmental psychologists, and things like that, who say what kids need to learn, what they need to know at certain points in time. So I'm glad that we have that. Some of you may remember back forever ago, there was something called the No Child Left Behind Act or whatever that George Bush signed in. And honestly, in a lot of ways, evangelical Christians are in favor of people being less knowledgeable about things. You don't need to know anything. All you need to know is that God loves you and he wants you to go to church on Sunday and worship him. That's it. That's the kind of mindset that extremist Christians have. But luckily, we do have separation of church and state, so we have been protected in a lot of ways from Christianity getting its influence in everywhere. So,
This one's coming from the Gaytheist. Would you say God is a narcissist?
Well, interestingly enough, there are different personalities for God in the Bible. Like throughout different parts of the Bible, there's the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament. The God of the Old Testament is like a sadistic, evil, sick being who will kill anybody at the drop of a hat. And the God of the New Testament is portrayed as a lot more loving, but they kind of try to carry over the personality traits of the God of the Old Testament. So he's just as like evil and vindictive as God of the Old Testament, but he loves you and he cares about you and he wants you to succeed. And it's just a really, really weird, bizarre thing. Do I think he's a narcissist? I guess I would say the God of the Old... Yeah, you know what? God of the Old Testament and the New Testament are both narcissists, I would say. But one thing they say is you should never diagnose somebody unless they're sitting in front of you and you've consulted with them and with other people about the diagnosis, because you never know if they're telling the truth. You never know if they're... I mean, maybe they're pathological liars and not narcissists, you know? It's impossible to know for sure unless they're sitting right in front of you, and even then, it's hard to tell. That's why psychologists say you shouldn't try to diagnose Donald Trump with any mental conditions. Only his doctor can do that, really. But if what he is displaying on TV is truthful and represents the situation accurately, then we can make diagnoses based on that. If you like what I do and you want to make sure I can continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, you can support me on Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check out my Teespring. I'm trying to make a shirt design for every cult I've covered. I haven't gotten every one, but I'm working on it. So check it out and see if your cult is up there. Second, you can support me by checking out my game shop. I sell controller, cartridge, and game box stands for every system from the original Nintendo and Sega Game Gear to the Xbox One and Nintendo Switch. So give that a look too. And finally, if you want to support me in some way other than monetarily, you can check out my other YouTube channels. I have a retro game channel where I answer questions like, why does Shy Guy have a mask? And why are CRT TVs the best way to play retro games? I also have the podcast where I talk about stuff I don't feel I can say on a monetized channel. And finally, I have my main channel where I talk about cults. I wish I didn't have to worry about dancing around subjects carefully in the first place, but I chose to do this as a full-time job, so unfortunately I rely on YouTube's AdSense and on the support of patrons to continue doing the work I do. Anyways, check me out in all those places if you haven't already. Thanks for listening, guys.